folks, we're back. We're going to be touching on the Korean War today with the Battle of Inchon. Mr. Smith's going to help commentate like the Pearl Harbor video. And I'm going to make it a priority to not talk about anybody still being alive, because the last video, Princess Mikasa of Japan, who was 101 years old, she ended up dying the same day we filmed the other video. So we're going to make sure that doesn't happen again. So yeah, it's the Battle of Inchon, September 15th, 1950. 15th to 19th. That was Douglas MacArthur with the pipe, his mouth right there. And then we got some KPA guys. You'll figure out who they are in a minute. So, this is just for the people watching at home. This has nothing to do with the Korean War. This is just, I've never done any videos on Korean history before. So I'm just gonna kind of give you a background of where we're at in time. So, the first known people that arrived in Korea was about 4000 BC. They were called the Kupo culture. It was an archaeological people that was recorded. We know not much about them, just found like bones and things like that. There was the old Choson era in 300 BC, and then there was some Han colonies in 100 BC, and then you had the kingdom kind of split into three parts. Around 50 BC to 600 AD, they were constantly going to war with each other. The old kingdoms of Korea. You had Silla, Goryeo, and Pakchi. I don't know how to pronounce those words.
Me either, sorry.
But they existed for about 600 years, and they constantly were going to war with each other. In 668 AD, the first united Korean kingdom existed, called Silla. And then from 918 to 1392, the Goryeo dynasty conquered the original part, and so they ruled for about 400 years. And then Genghis Khan took them over 1231 with the Mongols. They took over most of the universe. They had the biggest land empire in history. Obviously took over most things in Asia, including Korea. The Choson dynasty, which was the longest ruling in Korean history, was from 1392 to 1897. That's why they call this one the Old Choson, because in 300 BC, the same dynasty ruled, but they came back a couple thousand years later. So then they end up there for like 500 years. After that, the country kind of goes into turmoil. In 1900, you get a bunch of foreign skirmishes, mainly by the Japanese and some other countries coming in, trying to take some things from them, because during this time, imperialism was really a big thing for the world powers. 1910 is when, well, it's actually really 1905, is when Japan takes them over. And Japan rules them until 1945, until the end of World War II, when they lose and they're forced to give it up. In 1945, the 38th parallel is drawn between North and South Korea, which is still today the border. The Soviet Union occupied the northern part, therefore they were mostly communist controlled. And then the southern part was occupied by the United States, making them more capitalistic and democratic. In 1948, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is formed. Originally, they had made an agreement to make Korea independent until North Korea got aggressive, and then the UN come in to try to keep South Korea from being completely annexed.
Let me interject there. The original plan was to only temporarily divide North and South Korea, to be rebuilt as a because it was a colony for so long of Japan. To get rid of the Japanese influence, and then to hold elections and to reunite the country together. But of course, with the Cold War beginning, as soon as the World War II ended, that never happened, and they declared the North an independent country, and then in turn the South declared themselves an independent country. And then of course they were backed by, like you said, the Soviet Union in the North, and then the United States backed the South. They weren't a democracy by any means, but they backed the leader, Syngman Rhee of the South, to keep the communism from spreading throughout the entire country, as was the fear of most Western nations.
So, and then in 1950 is when North Korea starts to lead an invasion south of the 38th parallel to try to annex the rest of the country. So here's where we get Operation Chromite, which is the code name for the Inchon landing. So Inchon takes place about 3 months later after that initial attack from the North Koreans. At this point, it's just North Korea. China has not helped them yet up to this point, 1950. It's just the KPA, which is the Korean People's Army. Operation Chromite is what it's called. There's actually a movie about it. If any of you guys want to check that out at home, it's actually banned in the United States for some reason. I don't know why, but it is. It came out a couple years ago. Anyway, get ahead of myself. During the summer 1950, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea led an invasion into South Korea. That was North Korea. Just another name for it. This invasion conquered most of southern Korean territory rapidly, capturing the capital, Seoul, leaving only the Pusan perimeter in the southeast quadrant of the nation it's not really democratic, I don't know why I put that, but in South Korea.
Control, yes.
Essentially is what I'm saying there. It was a dictatorship, both countries were. After the Civil War ensued, the United States stepped in, theorizing the attack may have been prompted by communist powers such as the Soviets and Chinese, even though that was kind of a misunderstanding, but it may have, we don't really know, to be honest. But the United States did not want to originally get involved with just their military, so Truman goes to the UN to try to get some more help. This is the newly formed organization amongst countries after World War II, and this is the first UN action that's ever going to be put in place in history. So in July 1950, Douglas MacArthur, who's placed as Supreme Allied Commander, began crafting a UN campaign to recapture Southern Korea from the communists. This was to be an amphibious landing, accumulating air and naval strikes. The UN chose Inchon as the spot due to its strategic location. North Korea, as the communist allies, anticipated an invasion further south at a place called Kunsan. And before they landed in Inchon, the UN did a bunch of carpet bombings throughout the city at various targets and bombed the crap out of Kunsan, so that way the North Koreans would think that they were going there. Just the same thing happened in D-Day, where the Allies bombed Calais before Normandy to kind of fool the Germans. Same type of thing.
Yes, they actually had 3 different bombing areas to distract them, so they didn't know where. There was 1 on the East Coast and 2 on the West Coast that were phony bombings to prepare for the Inchon invasion. Because Inchon is so close to Seoul and so far up north, they did not, was one of the main reasons they thought they would never split their forces that much, but that's exactly why they did it.
This is really tough to read. I don't know why I did this, but it wouldn't work. MacArthur knew no one would see Inchon coming, so the UN could easily take back Seoul with as few casualties as possible. Seoul was very close to not only the beach, but also the 38th parallel. It was extremely close. The North Koreans took it in days, and we're going to take it, the UN's going to take it back in a matter of days as well. The plan was that recapturing Seoul would cut off a lot of import chains and force the KPA to retreat troops from the Pusan perimeter back to the capital, which would ultimately weaken their military.
Excellent.
So here's a map of how this is. So MacArthur's right here. I put him in. I just made a priority. Every time MacArthur's in my slideshow, he's got a pipe in his mouth. That's just who he was. What we gotta do. So here is Pusan perimeter, right down here. So it's in the south east portion of the country. So almost the entire country was completely annexed. Kunsan is about right here. So this is where they were originally planning on doing it, and this is where the North Koreans thought we were going to go because it was so close to the Pusan perimeter. But we decided to go to Inchon instead, which is right by Seoul and turn right by the 38th parallel. So we can recapture the capital, forcing troops to retreat from Pusan, and from there we can break out of the Pusan perimeter. And this is kind of how...
And a big part of that also was to cut off the supply routes for the North Korean troops. If you can cut off the supply routes, because they don't have a huge navy, they're not able to supply their forces by sea or by air. So yeah, cutting them off by landing in Inchon would also help to weaken the South Korean troops that were in the south.
Yes. So there's a map of how the armies moved and stuff like that.
Good.
Conquered.
Ready?
Yeah, we're good. Okay, so this kind of has the nickname the D-Day of Korea. Inchon was the biggest amphibious landing since the Battle of Normandy in 1944, which when you think about it, is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
The initial landings took place on September 15th of 1950. Operation Chromite was carried out. MacArthur planned the attack first on the Green Beach at 6:30 a.m. There were 3 beaches located at Inchon. There was the Green Beach, Red Beach, and Blue Beach. So 6:30 a.m. was the planned initial attack. Hours later, an amphibious strike on the Red and Blue Beaches. Now, the main reason they did this is because Inchon, in this bay that they were in, had the highest tide in the entire Asian continent at the time, which is kind of crazy. I just figured that out this morning. So they had to wait hours for the tide to go back down for them to be able to land again. So the first attack took place about 11 hours before the other two landings did. It was a amphibious landing, which means the definition of an amphibious landing, for those who don't know, is a type of military offensive utilizing ships to project ground and air power onto a designated landing shore. During the offensive, a total of 261 naval ships took part, as well as 40,000 infantry men and 75,000 total troops at this battle.
It's interesting, Green Beach being a peninsula, almost an island, where a natural harbor is. So I could see how attacking Green Beach first would draw the troops, through that small isthmus, and then when the Red Beach landing, that would pin them in there too.
Yeah, so you can see there's a little there's like a town right here, Womido, on the island. So they took that back, and then there's also a railroad here that I believe the North Koreans had mostly destroyed, but the UN came in and repaired so they could, it led all the way to Seoul. So that would help them transport troops and supplies, things like that more. The Red Beach is up here, and the Blue Beach is down here. So get into those. Right. So here's some of the nations that were involved in the UN. There were a few, these are all of them, that I could find that helped. Obviously the UN was an organization of many countries, it wasn't just one. The Republic of South Korea was the main one that we were helping out. The United States, the United Kingdom, we also had a couple troops from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, France, and the Netherlands. I just thought that was interesting to put in there.
Yes, absolutely. That, being, of course, 90% of the troop involvement was U.S. and supplies, but it was a multinational operation, the first one.
Yes. And then militarily for the KPA, it was just North Korea. China and the Soviets had not intervened yet up to this point in the war. China's not going to get involved until after this. We're going to push North Korea all the way back up, almost to the Yalu River on the Chinese border, and then Stalin's going to try to basically convince Mao Zedong to send Chinese troops in, which they eventually do. But that's later on in the war. Just a couple months later, all this happened so quick. Anyway, Green Beach landings. I'm going to go through each of the individual beaches so you understand what's going on. Green Beach was the first one attacked, 6:30 a.m. under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Robert Taplett. Launched the first invasion approximately 6:30 in the morning. This was a beneficial time to land based on how the tidal patterns were, like I said earlier. This was the highest it would be until that evening, which is when they attacked the other two beaches. This invasion caught the KPA off guard, as no one expected an invasion at Inchon, especially this early in the morning. They were outnumbered 6-1 by Taplett's forces, and the UN were able to take the whole beach by noon and only suffering 14 casualties, which is dead and wounded. I don't even know if any of them died, to be honest. On the other hand, KPA lost 200 men and 136 captured. The Red Beach. So the Red Beach was attacked afterwards in the evening. Here's a picture from it. There's an explosion of some sort. Following the capture of Green Beach 5 hours earlier, MacArthur authorized a second wave of attack on the Operation Chromite operation. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Murray, commander of the 5th Marines and the Regimental Combat Team 5, to land on Red Beach just before dawn on the 15th of September. The U.S. amphibious fleet were under heavy machine gun fire by the nearby KPA as they landed on the beach. However, the KPA's right flank was wiped out quickly with no American sailor killed. This opened the way for more battalions and Marine Corps to enter the battle for Inchon on the land. So, pretty good there. And now for the Blue Beach, which was basically simultaneously same time as the Red Beach. The Blue Beach Inchon landings took place concurrent to the Red Beach landings in the evening, around the same time, just before dawn. The Blue Beach Coalition was...
I think you're meaning to say before dusk, sorry.
Dusk, not dawn.
Yes.
Yeah, I know how this stuff works, guys. The Blue Beach Coalition was carried out by 1st Marine Regiment under the command of Colonel Lewis Polar. So that's him right there. And then this campaign was intended to capture the nearby suburb of Yongdungpo, which was right near the Inchon Beach. There was a large urban area near there. obviously under KPA control. So now we're going to go to the opposite side, the communist resistance. What exactly happened with them? The KPA was the North Korean resistance force and notoriously controlled most of the Korean land by September 1950, like I said. I forgot to put the commander, not important, they were there. They anticipated a UN landing more likely further south at Kunsan, like I said. So Inchon was unexpected, more or less. They still had troops up there though. They also had most of their military deployed to the Pusan perimeter, which was 200 miles away, so it's not like they could have just retreated that day and gone all the way back to Inchon. MacArthur landed 75,000 troops on the beaches of Inchon, while the KPA had 100,000 men captured in the weeks following at Seoul. And right after Inchon was going bad, they started retreating to Seoul, but the UN ended up taking it. So there's a North Korean flag. KPA. U.S. breakthrough. So this is what happens after the landings, kind of going to, the goal is to go and recapture the capital at Seoul, which will be the second battle of Seoul. The first day of Inchon offensive was a huge success for the UN. They had secured all land areas and decisive positions with very few losses compared to the communist opposition. By 6 p.m. on September 17th, the edge of the Kimpo airfield was reached. The Kimpo airfield was a big deal, as the UN had no way of launching aircraft inside Korea without departing from Japanese stations. So this was huge for shipment of additional supply, because that's where they launched the amphibious invasion, was from Japan originally. But now they can bring them into Korea with this airfield.
And remember, the South Koreans had zero Air Force, so without the UN Air Force or the U.S. Air Force, that's why they didn't have any type of bases. So they had to secure this in order to be able to use it. Was because the South Koreans did not have any Air Force.
So that also played a role in choosing where to have the invasion at Inchon, so that way they could take that back and also Seoul at the same time without many casualties. Let's see here. KPA resistance pushed back after the landing. Landing. The UN cut off trade with many other supply chains on the coast. Following this, KPA were forced to retreat to Seoul, but it'd be a matter of days until the Americans and the UN recaptured the city. The KPA resistance was unprepared for the landings at Inchon, resulting in the UN forces not losing too many men compared to the KPA, who lost a lot, hundreds, in fact. Fun extra facts. This is, I think, my last slide. Just some fun facts about this battle. Inchon is usually considered to be the turning point of the Korean War. Some people argue Pusan perimeter is, but Pusan perimeter was kind of a blowout for the South Koreans. Inchon is where it kind of becomes a decisive fight again. I don't even know why I said again. It was never really a decisive fight before that. Inchon was the largest amphibious invasion since Normandy in 1944, which was D-Day, the famous World War II amphibious landing. Ranking as the 5th largest amphibious offensive in history, Inchon is. So that's pretty big too. The KPA used Soviet-made aircraft to attack some UN ships, including the USS Rochester and HMS Jamaica, damaging the ships. However, there were no fatalities, and on one of the ships, only one man's leg was wounded. That's all that happened on those, but they were attacked and damaged. The second battle of Seoul takes place on September 21st, so this is only less than a week after the initial landings. Then the next day, the KPA retreat from the Pusan perimeter, and on the 22nd, and Seoul is fully under South Korean control by the 25th. The Han River was captured by the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines beyond the Kimpo airfield on the 18th. Railroads were repaired near the area. Like I said, I showed the railroad earlier, allowing for the transportation of 53,000 more troops and 25,000 tons of additional supplies to help retake the capital, Seoul.
Excellent. Yeah, so in the end, the result was by the 25th of September, Seoul was recaptured and South Korea was liberated. But of course, it's just the beginning of the war, because of what comes next is the push north, and then the Chinese giving 300,000 men to help the North Koreans not lose the entire war, which brings us to
there's my sources.
Drawn out.
Thanks guys for watching. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe. See you next time.
Your horse. All right, well done, Trenton. Thank you, sir.
Always make sure to put a horse at the end of the slideshow. We're the Broncos after all.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
That's right.